Hey everyone, I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader. I'm back with part 2 of my June reading wrap-up video. So in the second half of June, I've read 2 novels and a children's book, a very special children's book, which I'll be talking about. And it feels like I've sort of slowed down on my reading a bit, like that this isn't as much as I usually read. I mean, I know reading isn't a race and different books take different amounts of time to read, but I keep getting frustrated lately that I'm not reading more than I am. And I know partly why I'm not reading more than I am is because I get so involved in these things, talking about books, making booktube videos and writing reviews on my blog, which are all really fun things, and I'm not complaining because the really obvious thing if I want to read more is to cut back on doing these things. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are if you make booktube videos, or if you have a blog, or if you write reviews on Goodreads. How do you strike that balance between your responses to books and talking about books, or actually sitting down and reading? I've been thinking recently that maybe I should rein back on some things so I can actually read more books and enjoy them, because I'm really quite busy since I have a full-time job during the week which has nothing to do with books. And then on the weekends, I also work part-time as a massage therapist. And then obviously I go to lots of book events in the evenings, and then make booktube videos and do the blog. And then every once in a while, exciting new projects. Like I finally just launched with Anna James, the Anna and Derek Book Club, which I'll post a link up there if you haven't seen. It'd be really great if you join in. We have 8 excellent, really interesting books that there's going to be a lot to say about. So all these things are really fun and exciting and good, but then also I have to try to have something of a personal life and spend time with my boyfriend and my friends as well. So yeah, it's just a lot, and I find it a bit hard sometimes to get that, really sacred private time where you're just sat there with a book really communicating with it. But it'd be good to get your thoughts about this and how you find that balance in life. So in the past couple of weeks, things have been busy as usual, where I got to go to a fun event organized by the Society of Authors, which is an organization I wasn't really aware of before. But they orchestrate a number of awards for authors, like the Betty Trask Award and the Somerset Maugham Award. So it was an event with lots of authors there, receiving awards, receiving support from their fellow authors. It was really lovely to see. And I had that weird experience, which has happened a few times at events now, where an author will come up to me and say, hello, I'm such and such. Thank you for supporting my book. And it just blows my mind every time that these authors would recognize me or know who I am. So at this event, the author Martin MacInnes came up to me. He wrote a really wild experimental novel called Infinite Ground that was published last year that I really enjoyed. It's sort of this odd detective story which becomes much more of a philosophical query into the nature of being. And so it was lovely chatting with him, another great bearded author. It was also nice to see at this event the author Ross Raisin take an award. He just recently published a novel called The Natural. And at one point, an old man got up and started to give a speech, and I was sort of wondering, he looks quite familiar. I am so bad at recognizing really famous people. And halfway through his speech, I suddenly realized, oh, that's Philip Pullman standing in front of me. Wow, he's amazing. And then the writer Ben Ockery got up and gave a very powerful speech. I'll show a snippet of it here now, just to give you a taste of what it was like.
When they ask me what is the role of the writer in society, I want to ask if the society uses language at all as part of being a society. In a world made of cobwebs, the role of the spider seems self-evident. Enough of the metaphors. Let's speak plainly. We write because we have a passion for language and a passion for making sense of the world. The world does not make sense by itself. The conflagration of Grenfell Towers does not make sense by itself. The First World War does not make sense all by itself. A woman or man suffering depression finds that the depression does not make sense all by itself. It is a special privilege to be able to carve out time in the day to try and make sense of this abundant conundrum of existence. But the privilege of carving up some time to do that ought to be more than earned 10 times over by the intensity of application to the art and the craft used to try and make sense of this strange business of life.
It was a really rousing speech about the importance of authors and writing in society, something which I think continuously needs to be addressed because so little support is given in funding for the arts compared to other aspects of society. But really, it is such an integral part of society. So the Society of Authors Awards was a really fun, interesting evening. And then, crazily, the next night, I went to the announcement for the Desmond Elliott Awards, which is an award for first novels. And one of the 3 shortlisted books for that award was Harmless Like You by Rowan, Hisayo, Buchanan. And I actually got to meet her as well, which was so wonderful because we've had some interactions on Twitter and stuff, and she just seems like a really lovely person, somebody that I would have a lot of shared interests with. So it was great to be able to chat to her for a while. So then also in the later half of the month, for 5 days, I went away to Spain for a bit of a holiday. And I'm not going to go into that because talking about holidays is boring, but I didn't do as much reading there as I wanted to because I got really into snorkeling, and I could just spend hours and hours floating on the water looking down at fish. But a couple things I want to point out about that Spanish trip to Barcelona is that I came across this big huge book on the street, this work of art, which I just loved and was so excited to see. And then another fun bookish thing I did in Barcelona was go to an antique bookshop that's called Libreria Articularia Comelles, and that is near the Plaça de Catalunya, which is a really big famous square in Barcelona. And this is a great dusty old bookshop that you have to climb up all these stairs to get to and then press a buzzer to be admitted to. And you can look around and you could actually buy books from the 1500s and 1600s. I mean, they'll cost you a lot of money, but it's just sort of mad that I could just take down these books and look at them that were 500 years old. Obviously, they have a lot of religious textbooks, but they have books in all languages, and it was just so much fun wandering around for a while, taking down these books and looking at them. I know I won't be able to afford any of these books anytime soon. I mean, some of them cost 2,000 euros, but it was a great place to wander around. So, on to the books I read in the second half of the month. The first was A Boy in Winter by Rachel Seiffert. Now, I've already talked about this book in my favorite books of the year so far video. It's set in a small Ukrainian village in 1941 when the Nazis come marching through. And it follows the lives of several of the villagers, but also one of the Germans who's an engineer building a road through the town for the Nazis. And that engineer has taken this assignment because he wants to be on the periphery of the war. He's been sort of conscripted into the army, so he needs to be a part of it, otherwise he'll go to jail. But he wants as little to do with the fighting as possible. So he takes this job in this remote village, but then he finds himself really confronted by what's happening, and he faces this moral dilemma of what he would do. And I think that's such a compelling issue to explore in fiction, of being in a time and place in society where you're basically forced under law to do these horrible things, which you just know morally are wrong. I mean, not even morally, just like any human would know that this is wrong. And the choice you have to make in that instance, do you sacrifice your personal safety, standing up to your principles and trying to help other people? Or do you fall back on that instinct for self-preservation? That's a question that she explores so meaningfully and poignantly in this novel. So the Jewish people have been corralled into just this one sort of basically a cell that's being overseen by armed guards. And these Jewish people are told that, they're going to be resettled. But 2 young boys refuse to comply with this and run away instead. And it follows their journey, which is a gripping and terrifying one. And I'm not going to give any spoilers, but the end of this novel is so powerful, not just because it's devastating, but what it says about identity and how we have to morph and change our identities as we grow through life. And something I love so much about Seiffert's writing, she's done this in other of her books, like The Walk Home, which is another novel of hers I absolutely love. She has this way of describing characters from the outside, like an external physical description, which manages, even though you don't see their thoughts, you still get that character's emotion so strongly. Like she does that with the older boy in this novel, where she describes the way he stance or a certain like look of his eyes, and it just conveys so powerfully what he's feeling. And I think that's such a strong thing for a novelist to do, rather than resorting just to like, he was thinking this, he was feeling this. I think to do this as she does takes such precision and skill as a writer. So yes, one of my favorite books of the year. I loved this novel, and I also read this novel as part of a sort of mini book group that I've formed with a couple of writers, Antonia Honeywell and Claire Fuller. Every like 6 months or so we meet up and have lunch and chat about a book that we've all read. And I picked our choice for this meeting, and I was so glad that I selected this novel because we unanimously thought it was just a great book. Next I read When We Speak of Nothing by Olumide Popoola. This is published by Cassava Republic, who publish a lot of interesting current African fiction. So this novel hit a bit close to home for me because it's set in London in 2011, and I remember that time very vividly. If you recall, there were riots in London and across the UK that year when a young black man named Mark Dugan was shot by police, and it just brought to the surface all this racial tension that there was in the country. And so over the course of a few nights there was a lot of looting and fires because of that. And I remember traveling home on the bus late one evening where the riots broke out in Brixton, which was quite close to where I was living. And I was traveling on a bus, and the bus had to be diverted because it was too dangerous to go into that neighborhood. And there was this heightened degree of concern on the bus because nobody knew what was really happening or how extensive the riots were. And for weeks after these riots took place, the media was just filled with the question of like, why did this happen? And nobody could really seem to answer it. There's the point of view of some people in the media that this was just an excuse that young people took to get some nice free footwear or clothing. And then others who felt that this was the voices of young people rising up who felt like they didn't have representation in the society. But what you didn't get very often in all of this media coverage was actually young people talking about their experiences of it. And this novel goes something to speak about that, where it shows two young men who are 17 and living in North London and are just on the brink of developing into adults and becoming much more aware of the society around them. One of the boys, Carl, who's queer, meets his estranged uncle, the brother of his father that he's never known, and he's given the opportunity to go to Nigeria to meet his father for the first time. So we follow his journey there and his experiences in Nigeria, becoming much more aware both of himself and the larger world, issues particular to Nigeria that are very far removed from London. And then his good friend Abu, in Carl's absence, he becomes sort of friends with these very like bullying type boys who are called the wannabes, and his experiences with them when the riots break out and their reactions to it. And the author, she gives such a strong sense of the pressure that Abu feels, this like heightened self-consciousness he feels going around in the city, and how he's perceived as a minority ethnic who's just grouped in with these black and minority ethnic youths that are assumed to have caused these riots. So the novel follows a few weeks of both of these boys' lives and their communication with each other. And outside of these political and social issues, it's just a strong novel about friendship and first love. So I thought this was a really strong novel that I enjoyed reading. And finally, I feel so privileged and happy to have received this children's book written by Jen Campbell and illustrated by Katie Harnett. It's just a lovely, lovely book, and I feel so lucky to have been sent a signed copy of it. I found it really restful and relaxing one evening, just going through and reading this and taking my time with it. It's the story of a dragon named Franklin who loves books, and he wants to spread his love of books. But people he encounters are very nervous about him because he's a dragon. And I think the message of it and the story of it is just so great. It's going to be such a great thing to read to young people, to help inspire them to find a love and passion for books. It's a really inventive and fun story, and I'll show you there's just lovely illustrations that go along with it. So if you want something to read to young people to help inspire them to read, I'd really recommend this. And it's just lovely receiving this too, because I'm sure lots of you are already aware of Jen Campbell's BookTube channel. If you're not, go to her channel right away and watch some of her videos and be inspired, because she was one of the first people that inspired me to join BookTube. She speaks about books so intelligently and insightfully, and it's something I feel like I can only aspire to. So I really admire her and enjoy watching her videos. I think she was one of the first people too that made me realize that BookTube, isn't all just about young adult novels. You can talk about great adult novels and also poetry as well. So that is it for this month. That's what I've been reading and doing. But let me know what you've been reading and what you've been up to in the comments below. I love chatting with you in the comments. I think really that's the funnest part of doing BookTube videos and why I'm so excited to keep making them, even though it cuts into my own reading time. So thanks for watching and happy reading, everyone.